Hello, I greet you. Today, I would like to discuss the pain associated with leg lengthening with you. The pain differs a bit between the thigh area and the lower leg area. However, I must preface with some basic facts or fundamental aspects regarding pain and leg lengthening. A leg lengthening is indeed certainly not pain-free. This means that one must expect pain in the context of leg lengthening. There's no way around it. The second point is that the pain is highly individual. That means I have patients who, I wouldn't say are practically pain-free, but can absorb it very, very well. And I certainly have patients who have a higher baseline level of pain. And point three, pain in the thigh area and pain in the lower leg area differ significantly in the context of leg lengthening. The leg lengthening itself, or rather, in the thigh area, it is generally relatively clear when pain typically occurs and what type of pain we are dealing with. Here we also need to distinguish the types of pain. That means in thigh area lengthening, we classically have two pain peaks that differ in the period when they occur and naturally also differ in the character of the pain. For example, we have our first pain peak right after the operation, not on the day of the operation, but usually the day after the operation. Here we are talking about surgical or operative pain, which is sharp pain. Basically, we have swelling in the thigh area, we have wound pain, muscle pain, and bone pain. There they lie in bed, and at first everything hurts. Then they receive adequate pain medication, and then they are mobilized. They start walking relatively rapidly with forearm crutches, which helps reduce the swelling, and thus they overcome this first peak relatively quickly in order to. That means by day 2, day 3, day 4, they are already very well on track. They are walking quite a lot with the forearm crutches, and accordingly the edema and swelling in the legs disappear. They then enter what I always call the happy valley because the patients are mobile. They are walking around well with the forearm crutches at first, and the pain level slowly decreases to a relatively low and moderate level. That essentially marks the first peak. This is surgical pain, which is a classic type of pain, and after this first peak, they then start the leg lengthening process. When you start lengthening, you have to imagine that at the beginning, the muscles are not extremely tight. They generally speaking, in most cases, have a certain reserve flexibility. As you lengthen, you are initially lengthening the bone, so the muscles gradually come under tension. In general, this process requires patience. Basically, this means that at some point they will reach a tension limit or a tension level where the muscles are tightly stretched like a guitar string. And this essentially reflects the second pain point. The second pain point in the entire procedure, especially in the thigh area, reflects the tension point of the muscles, and this pain usually occurs at around 1.5 centimeters. That indeed depends very much on their pre-stretching, or rather their level of flexibility, significantly. The more they are pre-stretched, the more they can push this tension point backward. 2001 they are, or the more muscle mass you have, the earlier this tension point appears. To give you a bit of a reference, at around 1 centimeter to 1.5 cm in the thigh area, most patients reach this tension point. And the nature of the pain at this tension point is now very different from the nature of the pain after the operation. The nature of the pain at this tension point is more like muscle pain during continuous muscle soreness for 24 hours. It's a kind of somewhat dull background noise that is very disturbing, incredibly unsettling and annoying. This is not a sharp pain with distinct pain peaks throughout the day, but rather indeed a background noise that lasts 24 hours and can be truly very exhausting, both physically and mentally. And you can only combat this point or this tension pain by stretching your muscles accordingly, which means lengthening the soft tissue area just as you lengthen the bony area. I have already explained in detail in previous videos what you need to do in order to effectively and properly stretch in the soft tissue area and in the bony area. You simply need to absorb and resolve the discrepancy between bone and muscle, and then you will have a chance to cope well with this slight tension pain and the background muscle soreness. That means, to show it very clearly again, we are here at our surgical pain peak, and after a few, let's say days, sometimes weeks, this tension pain slowly starts to appear. This tension pain, when it is present, from that point on, it is essentially, in fact, in your hands which direction the whole thing actually develops. If they can completely absorb the pain or discrepancy 100%, then over the course of the leg lengthening, they will gradually and indeed slowly feel a reduction in pain. They will manage well and will also be able to sleep well. Sleeping well during the leg lengthening process in 2001 means that waking up once at night is normal. Then they will be able to reduce everything to a very tolerable and extremely good level and will manage the leg lengthening very well. If they can't manage that, if they can't absorb this tension discrepancy, then you have to imagine that this difference between the bone length and the muscle length keeps increasing, and accordingly the muscle tension also increases and naturally the pain increases as well. And this can become relatively unbearable at times. There are classic indicators of when this tension becomes too much for the patients. The first indicator is generally that a large amount of painkillers is typically being consumed. The second stage is basically the night's rest. That means they have a tension level and they typically try to absorb this tension level with painkillers. In general, this is usually the case. And when the level of medications for pain relief drops below the level of tension during the night, they are wide awake during the night. That means they fall asleep with good painkillers and after an hour they are wide awake. Then they walk around, are nervous, are restless, and then they need to stretch, take a hot shower so that the muscles relax nicely, and only then can they sleep again. This means their night's rest is incredibly fragmented, and accordingly their ability to recover the next day is significantly impaired. This should definitely be avoided, and accordingly one should always ensure that the muscular length and the bone length remain at the same level. This way, the tension level does not increase but slowly decreases, and likewise the pain level gradually decreases. This is the case in the thigh area. We have a lot of muscles here, so we need to distinguish the thigh area from the lower leg area. For example, when we look at the lower leg area, looking at it, we then have the phase, this first operative phase, the phase of pain after the operation somewhat extended, because the lower leg area is much more complex surgically in the lower leg area. That means they have two bones, they have to cut through two bones, and they have to connect the two together. This means the surgical side is much more intensive. Accordingly, the recovery phase from the operation itself is also much longer. Here we are certainly talking about a period of 4 to 6 weeks until all the swelling is out of the lower legs, and they can walk wonderfully. They will be walking before that. Generally, we start walking with forearm crutches from day 1, day 2. Nevertheless, the lower leg lengthening in general has a more intense and challenging initial phase. The tension in the lower leg area compared to the thigh area usually occurs a bit later. It typically appears at around 2 to 2.5 centimeters. It is simply absolutely important that they maintain their mobility and that they consistently keep it. The best thing for the lower leg area is to always stay mobile and cover a certain walking distance. This is not only beneficial for stretching and flexibility, meaning for tension absorption and muscle lengthening, but also for bone growth, because mobility always induces new bone. That means in the lower leg area, they experience a second peak of pain in terms of tension, but it occurs later and is significantly flatter compared to the thigh area. Nevertheless, the same applies as in the thigh area. You need to absorb this tension, which means you need to do the stretching exercises so that you can nicely lower the entire level, and then you will also sleep well, regenerate well, and go through an excellent leg lengthening process. But this is work they have to accomplish, and then they do it wonderfully and can achieve their goal excellently. Thank you for that.